So part of what we do at the Lewis Center is both the housing and transportation side of things. We think these things go very well together. And, we got a real kind of, I think, look in the weeds of the housing side of things. And now we're going to kind of switch gears, transportation pun intended there, to really kind of take a break just a little bit. But we will come back as a number of as both actually of our non-local case studies actually have some really good housing connections. So part of what we also want to do in this panel is think about how to improve and address transportation equity, both from infrastructure and non-infrastructure sides of the coin. We need kind of, I think, an all hands on deck approach to things. And so a couple of the themes we're going to touch on, actually, I do want to point out some of the Lewis Center Research Connection work, if you want to kind of dig into that. So our first speaker is going to talk about Vision Zero in efforts in New Jersey. And, many cities, including the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, many of our local jurisdictions in this region have a Vision Zero policy, and it's something that's a program and something that we've been really working towards for quite some time at this point. And sadly, there's really hasn't been very much progress. And sometimes it's very hard to even envision that a complete reduction or elimination in traffic deaths is possible. And so part of why we want to highlight Hoboken is that they've actually showed that, right? And I do want to acknowledge it's a very different place than Los Angeles. But to the idea that we can, I think, and that our keynote speakers kind of mentioned, change is possible. And we want to really think about not getting too discouraged in doing things. I mean, I do want to acknowledge that in the city of Los Angeles, 300 people a year die on our roads, and 70% of those deaths are experienced by people who are Latino or Black. We've looked at this over a couple of 5-year periods in Los Angeles, and those racial disparities are actually getting worse. And so we really hope and want to kind of inspire people to reinvest in the opportunity to do something. But we're actually going to kind of dive in a little bit deeper, not just on Vision Zero in general, but about kind of daylighting. If you're not familiar, this is the concept of making sure that kind of cars are brought back from the beginning of the intersection. So when people are walking and crossing, people can just be seen better. There's more space, and that space actually allows a reduced risk. If you're not aware, California actually passed a statewide daylighting law that went into effect on January 1st that said that no vehicles could park 20 feet from the curb. And it's actually not even park, it's even like just kind of pause. So if you are like myself and you've been at a bus stop and you've seen an Uber waiting at the bus stop, and you're maybe flailing your hands to say, hey, the bus is coming, also this isn't the space for you, that daylighting law also applies to a lot of our delivery and pickup vehicles. And so we're going to see how California cities start to actually address this daylighting law. And what we've seen by large in Vision Zero, that kind of enforcement alone has a lot of problems, and that really through design, we can think about how to actually make it very evident to people that this is not a space and use that space otherwise. That's what we'll hear from our first speaker. And then our second speaker is going to talk about the Portland Mobility Wallet program. If you're not familiar, we also have this actually in LA. The second phase of this is actually launching today, soon, and so this is also a very different approach because we're thinking about kind of connecting to the housing panel, giving people options rather than saying we're just going to address transit service or pedestrian safety, which are things that are important that I think our local speaker will talk to. We're going to kind of give the opportunity to people, and we're going to think about transportation affordability as a way to kind of address what people's needs are. So after these two presentations, we'll have our kind of local reflections. We'll kind of bring it back to what we're doing in Los Angeles and the region and have an opportunity to actually hear from you all. And so with that, I want to introduce our three speakers. See how many different pieces of paper I can go through here. Greg Francese is the transportation planner for the city of Hoboken. He'll be followed by Madeline Feig, who is the Transportation Wallet Access for All Program Coordinator for the Portland Bureau of Transportation, followed by Alfonso Director Jr., who is the Advocacy Director from ACT LA. So please join me in welcoming our first speaker.
All right. Thank you, Maddie, and thank you to the UCLA Lewis Center for having me. So, as I was introduced, I'm from the city of Hoboken, which is located in New Jersey. It's directly across the Hudson River from Manhattan. It's a very small city. It's 1.2 square miles and has a population of 60,000 people. So it's very dense, and it's very well connected to New York. It has great transit access and is a very walkable and transit-friendly and bikeable city. So that's really our strong connection to Vision Zero. We want to make sure that people feel safe walking, biking, and accessing transit. And we launched our Vision Zero initiative in 2019, and we've had zero traffic deaths since January 2017. It took a while to get there, but one of our biggest successes is with what we call intersection daylighting. And so this graphic shows a typical intersection without daylighting. When you're approaching in a car, it's very difficult to see if there's a pedestrian approaching, and usually by the time you see them, they're already in the street. And in Hoboken, we are daylighting 25 feet from the crosswalk on the inbound side and 15 feet from the crosswalk on the outbound side. So when you cross the intersection. So the reason why we daylight in Hoboken is that we want to protect the vulnerable users, which we define as pedestrians, bicyclists, senior citizens. And in the state of New Jersey, like in California, there's a statewide law that prohibits parking within a certain distance from the crosswalk. In New Jersey, it's 25 feet. Municipalities have some discretion there to enforce their own readings of that. And then we also, as a very dense city, want to manage demand for curbside uses, and we want to repurpose that space. So this right here shows kind of some of the challenges as we see a surge in online commerce, food delivery. We have a ton of delivery vehicles that are roaming our streets throughout the day. And we have a little bit of a problem, an imbalance between curbside access and space for loading and unloading. And you can see that, it's very hard to see a pedestrian crossing the street with these crosswalks blocked by these vehicles. So we know that most of our crashes between pedestrians and bicyclists are happening at the intersections. When we did our 5-year Vision Zero crash analysis, we found that people walking and biking are only 8% of all crashes, but they're 40% of all injuries. And at the time, that crash analysis included 3 deaths, and they were all of those deaths as well. They were pedestrians crossing the street. And then what we try and do is we use daylighting to reduce crossing distances and improve sightlines, as I mentioned before. And as I mentioned, we have a 25-foot no parking from the crosswalk state law that we're enforcing. Of course, it's very difficult to enforce this with just ticketing. We have to put physical obstructions there. And you can see here, this is right outside Hoboken City Hall. So this is a classic Hoboken street here. It's very narrow. But you can see that when a vehicle is parked in that daylighting area, it's very hard when you're approaching the intersection to see that there's a pedestrian waiting to cross there. And as I mentioned, we're trying to manage curbside demand, and we know that there's not enough parking spaces on street for all the vehicles that are registered in Hoboken. So we issue about 12,500 on-street parking permits annually, and we only have 7,400 on-street parking spaces to accommodate them. So we look at repurposing this daylighting space for micromobility parking. We have bike share stations, and 80% of Hoboken is in a flood zone. So we try and use green infrastructure to help with our stormwater mitigation strategy and flooding mitigation. So I'm just going to go through really quick some of the types of daylighting that we use in Hoboken to show you all that it's not really just one type of daylighting, and you can pick and choose what makes sense based on the location and what your city is comfortable with. So we know the least effective form of daylighting in Hoboken is just paint and enforcement. So every intersection that has parking on both sides has some kind of painted curb or no parking area painted in the street. Unfortunately, it's not very effective. Cars will park there, people will stop there for deliveries, and it'll make it more dangerous when you're approaching that intersection. What's more common, about 60% of our intersections have paint and delineators. So we install 3 delineators on each side. These are flexible delineators. So, emergency vehicles, if they do need to make these turns, can drive over them. Of course, so can other vehicles to park there. But it is more effective at discouraging vehicles from parking there. And it is a great interim solution when we're looking at upgrading them to more hardscape infrastructure. Another great way is accommodating these bike corrals. So we have about 15 bike corrals located throughout the city that are in these daylighting areas. And a lot of our buildings in Hoboken, our residential buildings, don't have elevators and they don't have much space for bike storage. So in more densely populated parts of the city, they're very popular for residents that live nearby, and businesses can sponsor them as well to help with some of the maintenance. And then our city bike program, which is part of a regional bike share program with New York City and Jersey City. We have some stations that are in these daylighting areas. Some of the infrastructure has to be moved back from the 25-foot area. So you can see here, the bike station kiosk is outside that daylighting area, but it is a great way to repurpose that space. And we have painted and concrete curb extensions as a great way to improve safety and reduce crossing distances. And they don't work everywhere, so we have to pick and choose where we can install them. But we do try and use these wherever we can, especially in areas where there's more vulnerable road users. And as I mentioned, we have rain gardens and green infrastructure located in some of these daylighting areas to help with the fact that our city is very flood prone. So really the way that we scaled up is we started small. 10 years ago, we started with just 2 flexible delineators at one intersection. And since then, it's proved very popular and it was very effective at discouraging parking. And about 3/4 of city intersections have some sort of daylighting currently. And then where you want to prioritize daylighting is we have these priority intersections that are defined as areas near parks, schools, daycares, senior buildings. And that's where we invest a lot of our time and effort into making sure that there's some form of effective daylighting there. So this is the examples here are near a park and our middle school. And daylighting is a great way for us to improve street functionality. So as I mentioned, Hoboken is very flood prone. And what we've been building a series of resiliency parks, which above ground just look like a regular park, but below ground have hundreds of thousands of gallons of stormwater detention. And we also include curb extensions with daylighting as well. And this graphic, it's really hard to tell, but there's a calculation here that shows that they do contribute to the overall ability for the park to retain stormwater. And then we're working on a curb management plan currently, and we calculated a bunch of different current curbside uses based on performance and value and revenue. And we found, for instance, that using bike share in the curb zone is a much more effective way to make the street perform better and also generates more revenue on the street than just regular parking, including paid parking. And then, of course, over time, as funding becomes more available and as a certain type of infrastructure project comes to a certain intersection, we're able to upgrade the type of infrastructure that's there. So here you can see an example of over 10 years, it goes from just paint to delineators. And you can see there's a car parked in the painted area. And then when we were doing a street repaving project, we added this green infrastructure here to make it more attractive and also more functional and also more effective at reducing crossing distances there. And this is near a school. This is near one of our elementary schools. And you can see that over time, it went from just a painted area to a painted curb extension. And when funding became more available, we were able to build this big concrete curb extension, which was very helpful at safe routes to school and also just making sure that cars weren't parking in the illegal no parking area. So altogether, really to get to 3/4 of our intersections being daylit, we leverage political support. We have corridor street designs, which are rare, but when we do use them, we use them as an opportunity to upgrade every intersection along a particular corridor. And then our annual repaving and resurfacing program is the fastest way for us to get to most intersections. And we incorporate green infrastructure and repave in daylighting as much as we can. It's a very marginal added cost to the overall project. When you're talking about $1 million paving project, this might be, $100,000. And then we have our capital projects when we build our resiliency parks, as I showed before. to incorporate daylighting with green infrastructure. And then, of course, we use federal funding through the Transportation Alternatives Program. And then our community development department negotiates with redevelopers when they're building large housing developments to include Vision Zero improvements at all intersections, especially in places where there's high concentrations of affordable housing. And that's coordination we do with our planning department as well. So that's it. I'm sure there'll be some questions, but I think that in Hoboken, daylighting is definitely one of our signature Vision Zero strategies. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So now, as the next set of slides gets loaded up, we'll head back to Portland to hear about the Transportation Wallet Program.
I've been told to talk into the mic. How's that? Good. Hi, everybody. My name is Madeline Feig. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a program manager with the City of Portland with the Bureau of Transportation. Thanks so much, Greg, for sharing those lessons learned from Hoboken, and to UCLA for inviting me down. I am going to share an overview of the Transportation Wallet Access for All program, just to give a sense of kind of the trajectory here. I'll share an overview of the program. I'll talk a bit about the evolution of the program development, where we came from, where we're headed, share some of the logistics and details about how this program is implemented. Part of the goal here is that I think this is a program that is easily replicable in other locations. So I really want to be able to share some of the details about the things that we've learned, talk a little bit about our outcomes, some initial data that we've seen from the program, and then looking forward, some plans for the near future. So at its core, a transportation wallet, or a mobility wallet, as some other cities are choosing to call it, this is a strategy to bundle multimodal transportation incentives for things like transit, streetcar, bike share, ride share, e-scooters, generally giving folks options and choice, which I'll talk about a lot throughout this presentation. And for the City of Portland, the wallet is a key strategy for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, from an equity perspective, the transportation wallet helps reduce cost burdens on folks that are living on low incomes and helps increase accessibility throughout the city. And then from a climate perspective, I think everyone in this room knows financial incentives are one of the best ways that we can reduce drive alone trips and increase those multimodal options as well. And you may be familiar with the concept of universal basic mobility. It's something that's getting a lot of buzz nationwide right now. This is the idea that regardless of income, location, it should be easier for everybody to get where they need to go. That includes not just work and school trips, but things like medical appointments, access to food, basic services, and just seeing friends and family. And so the transportation wallet was really born out of this concept, and it's what continues to drive us today. And I always have to mention, the City of Portland does have several different transportation wallet programs, and they're funded differently, structured differently, and they serve different populations. So one of those, the Access for All program, is our equity program, which is what I'm here to talk about today. We also have some transportation wallets that are focused on zoned parking districts, where essentially folks can choose to trade in a parking permit in a specific zone for multimodal transportation incentives. And we also have a transportation wallet that's focused on new developments, or new mover program. Again, today focusing on this Access for All program, but happy to answer any questions about those others as well once we get there. So as I mentioned, the transportation wallet provides transportation benefits to folks that are living on low incomes. How do we do that? The key structure of this program is that it's implemented through partnerships with community-based organizations. And again, we love acronyms. I'm going to call those CBOs. And those include a wide variety of different types of organizations, everything from residential housing providers, service providers, nonprofits. We have a few colleges and universities, and some faith-based organizations as well. And I'm going to reiterate this throughout the presentation, but this partnership is really like the grounding structure of our program. They are actually the ones that are responsible for selecting participants and verifying eligibility based on income. So we really rely on those to help extend our staff capacity into the community. This is a long and probably very small list for you all, but this is our list of eligibility requirements. And essentially, the City of Portland and the Bureau of Transportation is not collecting any income verification as part of this program. Again, that's what we rely on these community partners to do. But this list includes essentially any federal or state or local aid program, including our local transit reduced fare program. So this is a low barrier of entry program. And again, we're not asking for any documentation of income or any ID to participate in the program. The evolution of our program, we started back in 2018. We had 2 pilot phases, and those 2 pilot phases were focused specifically on residential housing. They were in partnership with a select subset of residential housing providers in Portland. And then in June of 2023, we launched our permanent program with some funding from a climate and equitable mobility transaction fee in the City of Portland. And then beginning in July of 2024, we've received a 5-year funding allocation from the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which is essentially a fee on companies that make more than $1 billion nationally and more than $500,000 locally, and it's a 1% fee. And we are funded for 5 years, $25 million through that program, and I'll get into a little bit about that, how that will help us expand the program. And then 2025, we have our new cohort of community-based organizations. And then just to give an idea of scale here, like I mentioned, those first 2 pilot phases were much smaller, issuing about 500 of these wallets per year. And then we have been ramping up to about 18 community-based organizations per year. And then we're going to be adding an additional 1,000 wallets for each year. So the implementation and logistics of the program, like I mentioned, those community partners are responsible for outreach. They are responsible for income verification. We provide a specific allotment of wallets for each of these community partners. And with that number of wallets, they can decide who registers, who gets signed up. They're also responsible for answering those initial frequently asked questions with support from our team. The PBOT team, that's my team, fulfills all of those wallet materials in-house, and I'll talk about what that looks like. We are on an annual program cadence, but our CBOs partner with us for 2 years. That helps us to maintain those relationships and build them over time. If the CBO wants the same person to register for the wallet year over year, that's great. We can make that happen. We provide 2 different tiers of participation, and that allows different sizes of nonprofits and partners to be able to work with us with different levels of staff time. And we stagger our launches throughout the year so that we're able to focus on one community-based organization at a time, as opposed to having to launch them all at once. And out of our pilot phases, we really heard that folks wanted to not only have access to transit, but also some other choices as well. So we offer a couple different options when folks are signing up for a wallet. They can choose to have a 1-year unlimited annual pass for our entire transit system. They do need to have our reduced fare card in order to apply for that. But again, everybody who qualifies for this program also qualifies for that one. If they aren't sure if transit serves them well, or if they are not an everyday user, they can choose also to select either our options 2 and 3, which involve more of a multimodal option. So both a dollar value on a transit pass, but also our bike share and a prepaid Visa card, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. We also have a household option, which allows one person to apply and sort of be the person that maintains that wallet for the entire household. That can also include youth. So this is what the wallet actually looks like when folks receive it. There's a couple different things included. We have an info sheet with a QR code to scan to get to our website. We provide a transit pass for anyone who doesn't already have one, but we can also load funds or passes onto existing cards if folks do have them. And we do have a prepaid Visa card. This is limited in scope to only transportation related services. So if folks try to use it on Amazon, they won't be able to, but they can use it on anything else, both transit, micromobility. If they don't have access to a bank account, if they're unbanked, they can use this and link it to their accounts on things like bike share or transit pass as well. And we also provide a bike town code. That's our city bike share, and folks can use that throughout the year as well. As far as the logistics for getting folks signed up, we create a unique registration link for each of our partners, and they have staff which can help register the participants, and they submit a form. We don't ask for any information about whether that's verification of identification. They do not need to provide an email address or a phone number, but they just need to let us know some basic contact information so we can get in touch with them, and then that existing transit pass number if they do have one. We use a ticketing system in the back end so that we can maintain basically an association between each individual and the Visa card or Hop card that they have received. And then we don't put these in the mail. That's one thing that's a big lesson learned from our program so far. When people receive an envelope with things like a prepaid card in it, they put it in the recycling bin, they don't remember what it is. So we've found that it's really important to do a warm handoff between us and these community-based organizations so they can check in with folks, remind them what they signed up for, help encourage them to activate all of those benefits. And then I'm not going to spend time on this one. This is mostly if we get questions on it later, but folks always have questions about budget. Generally, our incentives are hovering around $1 million per year right now, and our staffing is about $500,000 per year. We have a team of 2.5 FTE right now that's running this program. And then some lessons learned. These community-based partnerships are, again, really important. The other lesson learned is just these delivery mechanisms. It has been honestly quite challenging to provide choice because it creates additional work and additional churn for our staff. Program logistics, things like having multiple backend platforms for things like transit passes and Visa cards, it does create challenges, and it's something that we're really working to hopefully expedite in the coming years. We have some tech constraints and data limitations as well, which I think we'll get to in the questions, but just some limitations on what we have access to currently. And I'm going to go through this pretty quick. Generally, the overview here is that most folks that we're working with don't have access to a private vehicle, which is important information for us to know. We've gotten really great feedback so far from participants. Most folks saying that they saved money on transportation costs, that it helped them manage their budget more easily, and they had more flexibility in how they get around. And then we've gotten some really great feedback as well from participants, just anecdotally about what this wallet has meant to them. I'm going to bop through the next couple because I think we're basically out of time, but we'll get to a lot of this during the Q&A. And again, looking forward, having this additional $25 million will help us really expand this program, additional staffing, additional outreach, and then more evaluation, which I'll speak on a little bit when we get to these questions. But yep, that's what I'll leave you with right now. And thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much, Madeline. And so I'm going to invite, wait, Alfonso, you're welcome to stay seated if you like.
Hello? Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Alfonso Directo Jr. I'm the Advocacy Director at ACT LA. I'm also a MERP graduate, so I'm really happy to be part of this program. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and to fellow panelists. So yeah, thank you, Madeline. So my role here on the panel is to kind of give an LA reflection. I didn't prepare slides. I kind of want to just go off of my notes here. But my general plan is to, and I think there are people, my general plan is to just give some context to LA and then our situation here in Los Angeles, reflect, give some reactions to like the programs, and then end with a call to action because I work in advocacy. So, you know, we always end with a call to action. So starting off, ACT LA, to give a sense of who I am and where I'm coming from, ACT LA, we're a coalition. We're a coalition of 49 community organizations. We organize transit riders, our members organize transit riders, low-income tenants, and we advocate for policies to create just and equitable transit systems and housing systems. So many of us here in this room who are from LA, we've worked together on many programs. We've worked on transit ambassadors, for example. You may have seen them on the Metro transit system. We work to advocate for the establishment and successful advocation of that program. They're an unarmed they're unarmed response on LA Metro, staff to help with navigation and with support for those who are unhoused, perhaps, to be able to just get around and access the region. So many of us here have, advocated for that together, and those on the Metro side have implemented it, and we're very grateful, and we look to expanding and enhancing that program and advocating for such. Many of us have also worked together on things like Measure ULA, United to House LA. That's a housing initiative in the city of Los Angeles that passed in 2022. And what it was a transfer tax on property transfers over $5 million to fund tenant protection programs and to fund affordable housing production programs. Really wonderful set of sweet 11 programs that the city is just about to implement or is implementing. Has some of the banner statistics is that 11,000 residents have received emergency rental assistance so far with the program. And ACT LA's particular interest is in the social housing program, starting a new program with the 25% of the affordable housing production dollars to create permanently affordable resident-run affordable housing in Los Angeles. So that's where you've seen our work. That's kind of the context of ACT LA. The transit context I'll offer kind of can get summed up in the numbers 988. So 988, as some may know, is actually like the mental health and suicide crisis line. So that's something to remember also. In addition to 911, there's 988. But 988 also are three important statistics I try to remember in my advocacy at LA Metro and the city. 9 of LA Metro's riders are non-white. So that means it's a largely community of color system. 8 in 10 of Metro riders earn under $50,000 annually. So that qualifies LA Metro riders for extremely low income housing. So when we look at keeping people in place, not displacing communities, we really need to focus, and particularly transit riders, we need to focus on the extremely low income and acutely low income categories of affordable housing to make sure people who are riding transit can stay near transit. So that's 8 in 10 Metro riders are earning under $50,000 a year. And these are Metro stats. You can find these on their website. And lastly, 8 in 10 Metro rides are on the bus. So LA Metro is a largely bus riding system. So all in all, Metro is overwhelmingly people of color who qualify for extremely low income housing and ride the bus. However, that's not all who we need to be on transit, right? To solve our climate issue, our climate problems, our climate crisis, we need to be able to have transit be the primary source of which folks get around in Los Angeles, and that's not the case right now. So that's the LA Metro context. How do these examples relate to Los Angeles? Those are what I kind of think about is the question of how we as cities enable regional access with priority for the most impacted communities. How do we do that? We do it through infrastructure and through programs. And that's what this panel, I think, is speaking to. We need to reorganize our road space to be able to provide for healthy and safe streets. And I speak to that from a very personal place. I take my 2 kids, 5 and 7 years old now, on a bike, a 3-seater bike, to school every day. And we're on the roads. Oh, okay, 5 minutes. We're on the roads, really, because it's sometimes scary. And I think the reality is that some of the things that Greg was talking about are really low monetary costs, like high impact measures. Daylighting is really at its fundamental basis, could be paint. And so that is, really something that we as LA need to lean into. And I encourage a lot of the agency and city folks in here to lean into making those investments in low monetary cost, high impact investments. But something that Greg said that I really appreciated, though, is that there's like a tiered implementation scheme, right? There's the paint, but then there's also the micro mobility parking, like being able to use that 25 foot of space by the intersection for other mode uses. And then there's, of course, like the more, the curb extensions that can go in. And I think that is a really wise sort of like way to, build in the reallocation of road space that's needed here in Los Angeles as well. And then speaking to the programming side, I think what I really like about Madeline, what I've heard about the mobility wallet program is the interagency coordination that program really, I think, highlights very well. That there is a transportation agency working with community-based organizations that are working with the city, who is presumably permitting the housing, affordable housing. And that kind of interagency coordination, I think, is something that we could really see more of here in Los Angeles. In the city of LA in particular, interdepartment coordination around our capital improvement plan, I think would be really wonderful to see different departments working together to implement bus lanes, bike lanes, things like scramble walks that are all kind of in the same vein of infrastructure that is pretty low cost, high impact. And also, speaking of interagency, when affordable housing development comes in, sometimes we often think about what are the parking impacts, but what are the transit impacts? Like, what are how can the bus service? I know there's a lot of my fellow bus service council colleagues here in the room. Like, what kind of improvements and increase in transit frequency can Metro, provide when LA City is permitting new development around, is permitting new development? I'd love to see that sort of connection between transit frequency increasing as development and density is increasing here in Los Angeles. So just to close in sort of call to action, I kind of wanted to give the Act LA vision so you know where I'm coming from with some of these, but so I'll start with that. So our vision, for those who are unfamiliar, is that Metro is a sanctuary for the public. The train and bus are fearless, consciously part of the region, and integrated into people's daily lives and neighborhoods. Metro serves the public as libraries do, a public system where people go to feel safe, access information, and receive a high level of service. Metro feels honored to serve youth of color and be a resource for all. Los Angeles is proud of how we have embraced a healthy, community-serving, world-class transit system. And so with that vision, we have campaigns for green complete streets. We want to, we're a lot of the community members in Act LA, particularly Kiwa, Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance, SAGE, Strategic Actions for a Just Economy, LA Forward, People for Mobility Justice, and others are advocating for, are the leads on advocating for green complete streets. So that's the umbrella term to encompass bike lanes and bus lanes, a tree canopy on streets. And we're really focused right now on Vermont Avenue and seeing a bus and bike lane on Vermont Avenue. I know that Metro is starting some of the quick build there. We're really excited for that. We want to see measures in the interim section between Wilshire and Gage as well, which is like one of the mid-central city part that really needs to be able to be cleared. Thank you. We have campaigns for fare free transit, as many of you know, and we really are advocating for healthy and human services, not police, to enhance safety on transit. That's where our transit ambassador advocacy has come from. So the last thing I'll close to call to action is really to nurture healthy and active lines of communication with community-based organizations. I think the program that Madeline showed shows that kind of interagency coordination. And I think to be able to get the public support, the political support that would allow for some of the Vision Zero things that Greg talked about really requires a sort of a healthy and active line of communication with CBOs. Not just Act LA, of course, with Act LA, but with others like Move LA and others in this room as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate the chance to react to the presentations.
Well, thank you all very much. I mean, I think that part of why I really enjoy working in transportation is I genuinely think it's a solvable problem, right? Like, there are a lot of things, honestly, I hear my housing colleagues talk about capital stack and filling things, and like, that genuinely feels like rocket science. Like, it's very difficult. Making sure that someone can go see their family, can get to the doctor, can get to their job, can cross the street without suffering serious injury. Honestly, these are really solvable. And so I think it's really inspirational to hear from all of you, because in the housing side, I think we need more, right? It's very clear. There's a lot of different ways. We don't have enough housing for everyone who needs it. And on the transportation side, these three discussions have highlighted, I think, what are the three buckets in terms of having a safe, reliable, and affordable transportation system. So I wanted to kind of dig in a little bit, both for Madeline and Greg, to pick up on kind of Alfonso's point about interagency. And I know Madeline actually had some kind of things about where it maybe doesn't work as well and where people are stepping in. So, how is this program coming together within the kind of agency context? And then for Greg, similarly, what is the relationship between like planning or public works, or kind of like get us in the weeds of like how these things actually come together? I'll start with Madeline.
Sure. Is this on? Yes. So as Alfonso mentioned, and as I mentioned several times in the presentation, the collaboration between the city of Portland and these community-based organizations that we're working with is really vital and pivotal for this program, as well as some of the micromobility organizations that are offering reduced cost programs and access programs as well. I would say one of the things that our program is lacking is really strong collaboration with our transit agency. It has been candidly a challenge to be able to move those collaborations forward. At this point, we're providing our transit passes for this program at retail cost, and we don't have access to a lot of data from travel behavior from these transit passes that we provide to community members. Obviously, that's a really big shortfall when we're looking to evaluate the program, because we don't have robust data telling us how people are using the benefits that we're providing to them. So looking forward, that's definitely a big goal in the coming years, especially with increased funding and scaling up this program, is being able to have that increased collaboration, interagency partnership, and in a way that I think other cities are really modeling with other mobility wallets. Being able to have the transit agency at the table for those conversations is going to be really important going forward.
Yeah, I had a slide that showed how we kind of scale this program to a citywide reach. And a big part of that is coordinating with our Department of Climate Action and Innovation. They lead the development of a network of resiliency parks that are being constructed throughout the city. The city only receives about $750,000 annually from NJDOT for roadway resurfacing. So if we just relied on that pot of money, we wouldn't be able to really have an expansive reach beyond just a few blocks per year. So we work very closely with our capital projects, namely these resiliency parks, to build out these really, these are $250 million projects. So that, adding a curb extension with green infrastructure is, it makes it look really nice. And then residents can appreciate the aesthetic and safety benefits of that. And like I said, it's a very marginal cost. And then we also have, as an older city, we're replacing all of our underground water infrastructure. And so whenever we do those projects, we have to repave the roadway on top of the water infrastructure. And so that's also another source of funding. We work closely with our engineering department and our water utility. So it really does rely on coordination, and especially with we're in Hudson County. They have 25% of our roadway network is under their jurisdiction. So we have to persuade them to also feel like they're a vested partner in this. So it really does require coordination among different city departments, and also our counterparts at multi-jurisdictional agencies. And then, of course, it requires leadership. Mayor Ravi Bala, who's our mayor, this is last year, has been an incredible supporter of Vision Zero and experienced personally the impact of not having, daylighting, and he understands, and so do our city council members. So that's really important to have that political leadership.
Picking up on some of the kind of partners you mentioned there, I feel like you made it sound like coordination is easy. And so I wanted to kind of, prod a little bit and follow up to see, you're talking about like the county and people. How do you kind of get people on board or bring people along, and what's the kind of tensions along the way?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's taken 10 years at least for a lot of these relationships to build. And that's why it's important to keep at it. You can't let, a couple of defeats really set you back too much. And then, of course, being able to pilot things. The beauty of what we do is these flexible delineators cost $150 each. So you can pilot them at whatever location makes sense. And residents get to experience firsthand what the safety benefit is like, whether they're driving or walking. And city council members as well get to experience it, and they get to hear feedback from their constituents, which again builds that political support, because whenever we take parking in Hoboken, it's really difficult to really persuade people that we're using it for a better purpose than just parking. And again, we're enforcing state law here, but it still is, you have to persuade people that this is a good use of the city's right of way.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we found one connection between Los Angeles and Hoboken is that every single parking space, people think it's really important. So, making sure we really think about how to use this space differently. The next question I want to ask kind of relates to how do we actually address equity in terms of prioritizing both people and communities. In California, we have a state kind of framework called CalEnviroScreen, where we have prioritized communities, right? So there's a sense to say, okay, like these are the places we know that have an increased pollution burden, that have socioeconomic characteristics that are very important. But the scale of places that are on that priority list is pretty big, right? And then there's also people, and I think that the mobility wallet and the transportation wallet speaks to, is that there are people who have needs that don't live in those prioritized communities, right? And so I'm curious for all of you, how do you kind of think about prioritizing both people and place in your work, and not just like, okay, we look at the map, we see, but really like, since we know that there are a lot of places that have priority, where do you start? How do you dig into that? I don't know if Alfonso, if you wanted to start about kind of ACT LA work of how, given the scale of need is pretty big in LA, how do you all kind of think about where to start?
Yeah, so ACT LA started in 2011 as a coalition, kind of as a way to consolidate site fights, so to speak, that were happening all throughout the city because of an expanding transit system that was forcing residents who were living near those transit systems to be pushed out and displaced. And so ACT LA became sort of the citywide and then eventually countywide coalition to be able to build power to be able to respond to those site fights and get some community benefits essentially from the transit system expansion. So for us, our priority came from where the impact was happening the strongest and the most acutely, and then learning from those community members and then building in those voices and experiences into the kinds of transit and housing policies that we advocate for, like Measure ULA, for example.
Yeah, I'd say when we looked at our Vision Zero crash data, we saw that bicyclists and pedestrians were way overrepresented in severe and fatal crashes. And so we look at where we can prioritize investments for those particular communities. And before COVID, about 60% of Hoboken residents commuted to work by transit, which was the highest percentage in the United States. And it's now around 40%. So most people in Hoboken are familiar with, the perils of walking to a bus stop, or if a bus stop, for our instance, is blocked by snow. We hear about it, and it's important for us to prioritize safety around those places. So I guess for us, we can look at a map and kind of do it because it's a 1.2 square mile city. But again, it's not just enough to look at the map. You have to make sure that the people that are getting to these parks and schools and transit are being listened to and served properly.
I mean, I think it would be great if we could provide a transportation wallet to every person who needs one. It would be even better if transit was free and we didn't have to do that. I think at our core though, and you saw this in kind of the scaling of this program, we saw a need to expand from just purely affordable housing providers to other types of service providers that are meeting the needs of other community members that we didn't see as represented in those initial pilot years. And we actually, in the past year, went through a pretty robust selection process for this new round of community-based organizations. We received almost 70 applications from different types of community organizations throughout the city, and then really did some deep diving into whether the diversity that we were hoping to see represented in the program was going to come to us through these community partners. It's a lot of work to figure out whether you're checking, being able to fill fill all of those needs. And I think there's also a really big, on the flip side of that, conversation that we have on an ongoing basis about, with a set amount of funding, is it a better idea to expand the dollar value of each of these mobility wallets, or is it better to offer a smaller dollar value to a wider selection of people? I don't have the answer to that. I don't think that any of us are able to say that in a concrete way, but it's something that we're going to continue looking at as our program expands and receives additional funding, to be able to decide whether the amount of subsidies that we're providing are sufficient, especially as fares increase over time. Are people able to use these benefits throughout the year? Do we need to look at increasing those dollar values, or whether we can continue to expand the program to more individuals?
So can you just kind of talk a bit about, it seems like you were assessing kind of the capacity of these organizations that came through, but going from 70 to 18 is still like a big cut you had to make. So what were some of the other criteria that you used to come down to your final list?
Absolutely. And there were a couple of new things that we implemented this year that I'll share, just out of lessons learned from our pilots in our first permanent year. One of them is that we know that not all community-based organizations are created equal when it comes to the type of funding and staffing that they have. So we work with some really large organizations that have hundreds of staff, that have a lot of time and energy to put into programs like this. Maybe they have an entire staff member that's just focused on transportation resources. That's wonderful. We want to work with those folks. We also want to be able to work with much smaller organizations that are maybe volunteer run. They don't have a lot of staff time to devote. So we created a tiered system this year, so that folks can participate on a broader basis with more staff time investment. And we give them additional wallets. They receive more compensation, but we also have the opportunity for smaller organizations to engage with us on a much more scarce basis, maybe checking in every now and then. They receive a smaller number of wallets, but they're still able to do that outreach and get those wallets into community.
Great. Well, we're going to go to Slido. So I'm going to have Sango get queued up. But you did just mention something that it was a question that I had in my head. So you have the wallet costs for the various things. You have your staff costs. And then do the organizations themselves get compensation for administering the program?
Yes, that's a great question. That's really important to us. We compensate our community partners on a community organization based level. We provide $1,500 a year for that larger tier organization level, and then $500 a year for the smaller tier. But on the staff side, we know that that funding doesn't actually generally get to the folks that are helping us with the day-to-day implementation of the program. So we also provide staff wallets for all those staff members that are helping with signups. That does two things. It helps compensate their time, but it also helps get them familiar with the program so they can actually advocate for the benefits that they received. Maybe they've tried a Lime scooter for the first time because they got a mobility wallet, so they can share that with a community member that they have that rapport with already. So I think both of those angles have been really important.
Awesome. That's a pretty unique approach. So Sango, I'm going to ask you to offer up our first question.
Okay, so can we start with the question regarding mobility wallet from Nick?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nick Perlfels from Shared Use Mobility Center. This question for Madeline. I'm curious, when you were thinking about the design of sort of mode split, I don't know, you referenced that maybe there is available, maybe it isn't, in terms of like the actual mode split in the first year of the pilot, what that looked like, and then also how you thought about apportioning in terms of the dollar value to each sort of mode, whether there were sort of goals in there, or how you conceptualize the mode split.
Definitely. So in our pilot, we relied really heavily on self-reported travel behavior data, which, as we know, is not always the most accurate, but something this is what we have to go off of. And we're still, for the most part, relying on that, although we are partnering with Portland State University again this year to do some additional evaluations, more robust evaluation of the mode split. As far as the apportionment of the different dollar amounts, I'm not sure if I mentioned this verbally, but the prepaid card that's included in those multimodal wallets, it only has $75 per individual on that card. And that's not a lot. That, especially if you're using it on things like Uber and Lyft, that's not going to get you very far. The goal of that is just to be able to supplement and provide an as needed, whether that's an emergency situation or something that's not served by transit, that's not intended to be an ongoing option. Folks are intended to focus primarily on transit. That's why the majority of the funding goes onto either that annual pass or the transit pass dollar value, and then also be able to use micromobility throughout the year.
Okay, let's switch back to New Jersey with a question from Alyssa. Oh, she's at the very end.
Coming to you.
Hi, thank you all so much for being here today. I'll walk by here so I can see you all. When I went to Hoboken, it was like going to Disneyland. I was walking around and taking pictures of everything. It was the best day of my life. The little stormwater gardens that you do as part of daylighting are something that we really need here. Can you talk about how having a citywide capital improvement plan helps you to fund and implement these multi-benefit projects?
Yeah, I can basically, if you remember back in 2012, I think it was Hurricane Sandy came through and really destroyed most of Hoboken's sense of security around stormwater flooding. So after that, we got a grant to develop a stormwater management plan, and that identified locations throughout the city that could be best served by green-gray infrastructure and tanks. And so we use that as our guiding document. We also look at areas near schools where we can install this infrastructure. We have a lot of our green infrastructure is built through, it's more of an ad hoc program. So building these resiliency parks allows us to build them as part of a bigger system for a specific location and address the problem in a much more coherent way. So it's multiple different approaches. One is through these big resiliency park projects, but also planning around implementing the stormwater infrastructure plan that we have. And it requires a significant amount of coordination with the Department of Climate Action and Innovation, which is a relatively new department. I will say we have a very small staff. We probably have 4 or 5 people working on this citywide. So it's both a blessing and a curse, because it's really easy to coordinate with a smaller staff, but also really difficult to get someone's attention when they're working on 3 or 4 different projects at the same time.
But I just want to follow up on Alyssa's point. You talk about the stormwater plan. Is there a different capital infrastructure plan that also kind of guides things outside of the stormwater?
Yeah, so the stormwater plan looks at multiple different defenses. One of them is it's resist, store, delay. And resist is a seawall that we're building. Store is these infrastructure, these tanks, and then delay are the green infrastructure at the intersections, these rain gardens, to delay the stormwater from entering the city's overwhelmed and old underground infrastructure.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Verheiden. I am actually a student with disabilities, being autistic. And one of my concerns is that how is the disability community being factored into these programs when it is by far the most transit-dependent population, and it goes beyond race? Everyone has a disability. And I'd like to ask what is your concern with disability? Because I road transit, and I'm also an urban planning BA and a sustainability MA, and I studied it. And my concern is, and also, how do you incorporate universal design into all this, which encourages design too? Because I feel like if you don't put the disability community as the first priority, it's only going to solve half of it at best. Only when you put the disability community first will you actually solve all of it.
I can jump in first on the mobility wallet. Great question, thank you. And we do work with several community-based organizations that are specifically focused on working with folks with disabilities. But we also know that based on our survey data from our program, that over half of our mobility wallet participants identify as having a disability. So we know that the folks that we're serving are part of that community. And we also know that folks have specific needs when it comes to accessibility. So we're working really hard, not only with language accessibility, but also visual accessibility of the materials that we provide. And one thing that we really do with this program is continued engagement, not only with the organizations that we're working with to get feedback about how to iterate the program and improve it over year, but also from participants. So we're asking for their travel behavior data. We're asking for them to tell us how they're moving around, but we're also asking them to tell us what's working and what's not about this program. And in that way, we've actually ended up being kind of a conduit between some of our mobility wallet participants and our transit agency, for example, an avenue that maybe they were not able to share feedback about the system working or not working for them, they were able to take that up the chain and advocate more readily for them to other groups as well.
Yeah, I think overall our approach to addressing people with disabilities, and the work that I do is when we're doing infrastructure projects to make sure that we're implementing things like leading pedestrian intervals, signal retimings, adding curb extensions, making sure that crosswalk markings are very visible, and for drivers, making sure that signage is clear and visible. Again, we're trying to design our streets for the most vulnerable road user in Hoboken. Those tend to be pedestrians and children, especially senior citizens. They need extra, they need shorter crossing distances, longer signal times. And so the work that I'm doing, we're trying to address it from that perspective. And I definitely can't speak on behalf of the city for anything beyond that, but I think we are struggling a little bit to expand that, to do a little bit more for people with disabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a great natural alignment between Vision Zero improvements and universal design, right? And it's really important to make sure that we're not just focusing, just on the road bed kind of part of things, but on like the sidewalk part of that as well. And so one thing to kind of give a comparison in the LA program. So UCLA is working on evaluating the LA mobility wallet. And in the first phase, we were doing qualitative work. And I think a couple of things that really stood out among our interviewees that have disabilities is that how much their travel behavior and their travel needs change day to day, right? And that there are certain days that people felt really good and were able to walk. And so if you had a universal design that could, accommodate those days where they felt like they could get on transit, that was good. But the mobility wallet was such a savior for those days they didn't feel good, right? That they had to get to things, but they just needed to pay for a car. And they didn't want to rely on their friends and family. And so I think that there's that's another place we can think about both the program and the physical infrastructure and kind of supporting that community. Sango, next question.
Oh, can you, there's a question from Madi, actually, right in front of me.
Hello, hi. I was wondering if you could speak to the impacts, either positive, negative, of the New York City congestion pricing, and what are your recommendations for LA on that front?
So I guess it's been, I think, a month, almost 2 months since congestion pricing was implemented in New York City. And as someone who rides the bus into New York City, I can tell you that, especially on weekends, the buses seem to be moving faster. The impact on Hoboken is obviously better bus reliability and bus service. Our main transit station, the subway service shut down for a full month, just as congestion pricing was implemented. So our New Jersey Transit had to provide, hundreds of more buses, and because of lower congestion in Manhattan, they were able to maintain a good quality of service, level of service that I think wouldn't have been possible otherwise. But I don't have any data, or it's more just anecdotal at this point.
Next question.
Okay, can we have a question from Will regarding the street design? Will?
There's a mic behind you, Will.
Maybe. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Will Wright with the American Institute of Architects. And this is really more of a conversation starter to, you can throw French fries at me during lunch. But in the spirit of safer streets and Vision Zero and all the efforts that we're doing, where can we start removing all the junk, all the plastic bollards, all the excessive signage? because it really starts to stress us out. It really makes our city less livable. And I'm wondering, as we move towards the utmost necessity to make our streets safer, what can we do to make them also more beautiful so that we are indeed happier and less stressed?
Sure, yeah. We do get some complaints every once in a while about the look of these delineators, and we usually tell people that if we want to have a citywide daylighting program, we have to make sure that it's cost effective. We don't have a huge budget for this, so initially we're relying on these plastic flexible delineators. But I think, as I showed in my presentation and mentioned, whenever we have a chance to upgrade them, these corners to include green infrastructure, I think it makes the whole area, benefit aesthetically in addition to safety improvements. And we also incorporate placemaking when we can, intersections that have, stamping, that are raised intersections near parks and schools, is something that's very popular as well. And then something we're doing to, I guess, address your issue about, stress and signage. We're doing a curbside management plan right now in the city of Hoboken, and we did a full digital inventory of our entire curbside. So our entire curbside regulation for the entire 1.2 square mile city is now digital. So that helps, reduce the reliance on curbside signage for more futuristic uses of the curb, such as autonomous vehicles, and also just Amazon being able to come in and know where there are loading zones, and where Grubhub comes in and knows where there's loading zones and what the availability is. So we're just trying to think about in the future how we can incorporate these different uses at the curb.
If I could hop in, yeah, thank you. If I could hop in, I think this kind of hits to the classic form versus function sort of question that comes up. I have an engineering background and I work with architects a lot in my background as well. And I think the plastic bollards that are really popular and should be installed a lot of places here in LA and elsewhere to help sort of improve the safety, I think that just really gets to the function component right away. And in terms of form, I love the fact that the city of Hoboken is using plants and sort of improving it as the tiers go up. I think the middle ground that I'm thinking of in my mind is in connecting it to sort of my call to action about coordination with community-based organizations and impacted communities, is the opportunity to create beautiful interim solutions. I'm thinking about painted crosswalks, like the scrambled crosswalks that potentially have designs that are built from the community-based organizations that are place-based, that really show the sort of the culture of a community sort of in the pavement. So sort of that middle interim sort of step. But thank you.
So we're running short on time as we're getting close to lunch here. So I want to just kind of ask each of our panelists to offer some of their final thoughts, whether on your own work, on other things, in terms of what do you think would be most impactful or useful, and kind of thinking about the broader efforts to address and improve transportation equity. So big question, no big deal. We'll start this way and we'll go that way.
Sure. I mentioned this at the beginning of my presentation, but I think it's the transportation wallet is a program that I think can be put in place in any metropolitan area. And so would love to chat with folks who have ideas about implementing a similar program in other places, and happy to share some of the lessons learned. We have a great little brain trust of folks that are working across the country right now to implement similar programs, and it's been really valuable to share those lessons. I think it's a program that can do a lot with not a lot of funding. We show that in our pilots, very small scale, but made a huge difference to folks who received those benefits during those pilot years. And one thing that's also been, I love to say we just are keeping this pilot mindset as well as we continue to iterate this program. And especially as we're dealing with a lot of shifts in policy, federal level and local. And as the communities that we're serving are experiencing a lot of fear, we are working to figure out how best to serve them and not trying to be too prescriptive with what we're offering. We work with a lot of immigrant and refugee populations, and we're working on asking them what is going to work best for them in the coming years. And I think being open to being agile and making change there is going to continue to be really important. So that's just something that I hope we can all carry forward as well.
Yeah, I agree that piloting and iterating are very important words to keep in mind, and also just be resilient and don't let don't let these setbacks that you're going to encounter deter you too much, because what we've done in Hoboken has taken over 10 years, as I keep saying. So it's not like we just woke up one day and were able to do all this and just start in places that where you know that you're going to have the biggest impact on the most vulnerable users, pilot it there, and then you can scale it up as people see the benefits and experience them themselves.
And I think the comments that come to mind is like lead with vision and lead with partnership. So, work with community, work with other agencies on a regular basis, and really, really lead and make decisions that create this vision for a healthy community serving world-class region. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much. I do want to kind of borrow a word from our last panel and think about maybe interim more than pilots. I will say the one kind of problem with pilots sometimes, and I do think actually both these two, Portland and Hoboken, have shown that it's not like the pilot isn't the end, the pilot is the beginning, and then there's actually a plan to keep going. I think too often cities end up piloting things, finding out that they do work or they need changes, but they don't necessarily know the next step, right? And so that's frankly been one of the harder things to deal with as we're having conversations with people about the mobility wallet in LA. It did a really good thing for their lives, and then it went away, right? So I think we need to pilot. So maybe interim is maybe the word we want to kind of borrow and use. It's like, this is an interim approach to getting to something permanent that can really kind of make a difference. And so having a pilot mindset, being flexible, but also like having that vision, as Alfonso said, to like, where are we going to go? What's our kind of goal here?